Most vandalism is just ugly destruction, but these 101 examples are in a league of their own. From pothole parties to fake tunnels, we are watching the world's most creative criminals at work. It is strictly illegal and totally absurd, but the sheer audacity of these unauthorized modifications is impossible to ignore. But obviously, don't copy them. 1. One frustrated resident got tired of the city ignoring a massive pothole, so he decided to shame them with a birthday party. He placed a literal cake with lit candles in the middle of the crater to celebrate its 3 months of existence. The embarrassing photos went viral instantly, and the road crews fixed it the very next morning. 2. Some evil genius bought official-looking voice-activated stickers and slapped them on hand dryers all over a busy international airport. The result was pure comedy gold, as dozens of exhausted travelers stood there screaming commands like "dry and bacon" at a plastic machine while the vandal watched the chaos unfold. 3. In a display of sheer audacity, a vandal in Russia climbed the spire of a historic government building topped with a Soviet star. He painted the star pink and added shorts, turning a serious communist symbol into Patrick Star from SpongeBob. He faced jail time, but honestly, the resemblance was absolutely perfect. 4. A minimalist art gallery was showing a blank white canvas, so a frustrated visitor enhanced the piece. They scrawled, "This is where I died from boredom," in tiny letters in the corner. It was quickly removed, but for a few hours it was the only piece that truly resonated with the audience. 5. A boring neighborhood sign warned everyone about hidden cameras on the property. But a Christmas-obsessed vandal decided to make it way more threatening. They added the lyrics, "He sees you when you are sleeping," right underneath in creepy red paint. Now, instead of feeling secure, every neighbor feels like Santa Claus is a high-level government operative watching their every move. 6. A cattle crossing sign warns you about cows, but one artist decided to raise the stakes. They used black tape to add a flying saucer hovering above the cow, complete with a tractor beam lifting the animal into the sky. Suddenly, a boring country drive turned into a warning about an alien invasion. 7. Most graffiti is just messy tags, but one vandal found a missing brick in a red wall and saw an opportunity for a classic reference. They wrote the lyrics, "Hello, is it me you are looking for inside the empty gap?" Now it is impossible to walk past that wall without getting Lionel Richie stuck in your head. 8. A serious bronze statue of a businessman looking at his hand received a technological upgrade from a street artist. They simply glued a smartphone into his open palm. Suddenly, the historical figure wasn't contemplating the future of industry. He was just another guy ignoring the world to check his text messages. 9. Someone found a door with a security sign that read, "This door is alarmed," and decided to personify the warning. They drew a terrified face with wide eyes and a screaming mouth right next to the text. It technically ruined the paint, but it made the door look genuinely panicked about the situation. 10. A driver crashed their car into a lamppost in a parking lot, leaving the pole bent at a crazy angle. Instead of fixing it, a local vandal painted the parking spot outline around the bent pole and labeled it "reserved for drunk drivers." It was a brutal public shaming that probably hurt more than the car crash. 11. A vandal in a small town got tired of a useless dead-end sign, so they painted a hyper-realistic, three-dimensional tunnel directly onto the brick wall behind it. It looked so convincing that multiple people actually tried to walk through it, forcing the city to install a second, even larger warning sign. 12. Someone who hated getting speeding tickets decided to give a roadside camera a makeover. They climbed up and painted a giant smiley face on the lens housing and added a sign that says, "You look great today." Now, every time it flashes, it feels like you're being chased by a very aggressive, glowing paparazzi. 13. A bronze statue of a famous historical writer in a quiet park looked a little too lonely until a vandal added a real bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken to his lap. It transformed a dignified figure into a guy who just had a rough Tuesday and finally gave up on his diet. 14. A public fountain in a city park always had crystal clear water until a group of pranksters decided to add a touch of color. They poured hundreds of gallons of non-toxic blue dye into the water overnight. The next morning, the elegant fountain looked like a giant, overflowing Smurf toilet. 15. A no diving sign at a public pool is standard, but some genius stole the sign and moved it to a local cemetery. Placing it right next to a fresh, open grave is the peak of dark, dumb humor that makes you feel bad for laughing while you call the police to report it. 16. There is a serious historical statue of a war hero on a horse that everyone ignores until a prankster added a giant traffic cone to the horse's head, like a unicorn horn. It transformed a symbol of violence into a majestic, neon-orange fantasy creature that became the town's new favorite landmark. 17. Someone found a blank white wall in a fancy neighborhood and simply painted a hyper-realistic power outlet and a light switch on it. They spent the entire day watching frustrated tourists trying to plug their dying phones into solid concrete while wondering why the infrastructure in this city is so unreliable. 18. A vandal with way too much time on their hands decided to fix a keep off the grass sign. They built a tiny, meticulously detailed miniature golf course right in front of it, complete with a windmill and a hole. It was a direct violation of the rules, but also an irresistible invitation. 19. Someone took a giant boring watch for pedestrians sign and added a realistic cardboard cutout of Bigfoot running across the road. It turned a routine safety warning into a legendary sighting, causing every driver to slow down and stare into the woods, which ironically made the road much safer for everyone. 20. A massive crack in a sidewalk was a tripping hazard for months until someone painted it to look like a tiny underground city. They added miniature windows, lights, and tiny people living inside the concrete fissure. The city finally fixed the sidewalk, but they actually saved the art piece for a museum. 21. A generic baby-changing station sign in a public restroom is helpful, but one vandal decided to scrape off the letter C. It effectively became a baby-hanging station. It was a terrifyingly dark modification that turned a family-friendly amenity into something that sounds like a medieval torture device for infants. 22. Every restaurant has a boring employees must wash hands sign, but a Star Wars fan used a black marker to cross out the letter D. It read, "Employees must wash hands," complete with a drawing of Han Solo getting scrubbed. It is against health codes, but the force is strong with this one. 23. A massive billboard for a gym showed a buff guy running, but the placement was terrible right next to a cemetery. A vandal simply spray-painted the word zombie on the runner's chest. It instantly turned a motivational fitness ad into a terrifying warning about an impending undead apocalypse. 24. There is a serious warning sign on electrical boxes that says high voltage, but a rock fan decided to clarify things. They stenciled the words danger, danger above it, turning a death warning into an Electric Six song reference. If you touch it, you still die, but at least you die dancing. 25. A standard no trespassing sign on a fence got a philosophical update from a local graffiti artist. They spray-painted violators will be fine over the threat. Instead of fearing prosecution or police dogs, curious explorers now just feel a vague sense of comfort and emotional stability about breaking the law. 26. A community garden sign politely asked visitors to please be gentle with the plants. A defiant vandal spray-painted a massive image of Godzilla's foot crushing a cityscape right next to it. It was a clear violation of garden etiquette and a powerful message about the true nature of urban growth. 27. A vandal found a yellow caution wet floor sign and drew a shark fin poking out of the water beneath the falling stick figure. Suddenly, slipping on a puddle wasn't the biggest concern anymore. It turned a routine liability warning into a scene from Jaws that actually made people walk much more carefully. 28. A romantic but destructive soul found a concrete wall with "I love you" sprayed in messy red paint. They didn't clean it. They corrected it with a red pen like a teacher. They circled the letters and wrote, "Please see me after class," turning a grand romantic gesture into a failed grammar exam. 29. A city statue of a generic businessman holding a briefcase looked incredibly boring until someone glued a frantic "help me" sign to the case facing outward. It looks like he is being kidnapped by his own job, which is honestly the most relatable piece of corporate art in the entire city. 30. The priority seating sign on the subway usually shows a pregnant woman and an elderly person. A vandal added a fourth figure using a stencil, an alien with a ray gun. It was a subtle inclusion, but it technically means Martians now have legal rights to sit down during rush hour traffic. 31. A very serious bronze statue of a politician pointing a finger toward the ground got a hilarious accessory. A vandal tied a bright orange yo-yo string to the finger and placed the toy on the pavement below. Suddenly, the stern leader wasn't dictating policy, he was just showing off his sick tricks. 32. Those ugly gray electrical boxes on street corners are usually invisible, but a gamer with some spray paint turned one into a giant Nintendo Game Boy. They painted the screen, the buttons, and even a Tetris game in progress. It is the only time utility infrastructure has ever made people feel nostalgic. 33. A massive, ugly crack in a beige concrete wall looked terrible until an artist drew a tiny caravan of camels walking along the fissure. By turning the jagged line into a distant mountain range, they transformed a sign of urban decay into a beautiful scene from a National Geographic documentary. 34. Speed bumps are annoying, but one vandal made them terrifying by painting sharp white teeth and a green scaly pattern on the asphalt. Now, driving over the bump feels less like traffic control and more like you're running over a crocodile that is trying to eat your tires. 35. A satellite dish on a rooftop is usually an eyesore, but a neighbor with a sense of humor painted the entire dish white with a yellow circle in the center. From Google Earth or a passing plane, it looks exactly like a giant fried egg has fallen from the sky onto the house. 36. A green drain pipe protruding from a brick building was boring until someone painted a red piranha plant coming out of the top. It is a classic Super Mario reference that turns a plumbing fixture into a warp pipe, making every nerd who walks by want to jump into it. 37. A spherical concrete bollard designed to stop cars looks boring, but a sci-fi fan realized it was the perfect shape for a Death Star. They painted the gray surface with intricate mechanical details and the iconic super laser dish. It is the only parking barrier in the world capable of destroying a planet. 38. A traffic pole had those little white reflective strips, but one bored individual used black electrical tape to create an iconic image. They formed a pixelated image of the Pac-Man ghost Blinky on the pole. Now, waiting at the crosswalk feels like you're about to get eaten. 39. A statue of a historical figure holding a rolled-up scroll looked dignified until a prankster taped a long white piece of paper to the bottom of it. They drew the logos and barcodes to make it look like a CVS receipt. Apparently, even great leaders buy too much candy and toothpaste. 40. Someone found a heavy metal bike rack that had been crushed and bent by a delivery truck. Instead of reporting it, they painted the twisted metal green and added a sign that said, "Hulk was here." It turned a broken piece of metal into a Marvel Universe crime scene. 41. A square sewer grate on the street looks industrial, but a vandal used yellow paint to turn the metal bars into a barbecue grill. They even spray-painted fake hamburgers and hot dogs sizzling on top. It looks delicious enough to make you hungry, which is weird, considering it is literally a sewer. 42. A generic pedestrian crossing button got a terrifying makeover when someone glued a realistic eyeball over the push mechanism. Now, to cross the street, you literally have to poke a stranger in the eye. It is incredibly uncomfortable, but I guarantee nobody jaywalks at that intersection anymore. 43. A forest trail had a large rock with a natural split in the middle, so a hiker painted it to look like a great white shark emerging from the ground. With jagged teeth and cold dead eyes, it is enough to make joggers sprint for their lives, even though they are miles away from the ocean. 44. An ordinary fire hydrant is just background noise, but a vandal with yellow and blue paint turned one into a minion from Despicable Me. It is staring at traffic with that goofy, goggle-eyed expression. And honestly, it is probably doing a better job at safety than the original red paint ever did. 45. A concrete barrier with a jagged hole in the middle looked like trash until someone placed a tiny framed picture of the Shawshank Redemption inside the gap. It implies that a tiny Andy Dufresne just escaped through the wall, turning a broken fence into a cinematic masterpiece. 46. A vandal found a statue of a horse and decided it needed to be anatomically correct for Halloween. They painted a full skeleton on the outside of the bronze animal. It looks like a Ghost Rider's mount. And it is honestly way cooler and scarier than the original historical monument. 47. The handicap symbol on a parking spot is universally recognized, but a graffiti artist added a cape and speed lines to the wheelchair figure. Suddenly, it is not just a reserved spot. It is a parking space for Professor X from the X-Men. It turns accessibility into a superpower. 48. A boring brick wall had a patch of ivy growing on it, so a street artist trimmed the leaves to look exactly like the Simpson family's hair. They spray-painted yellow faces underneath the greenery. It is vandalism, sure, but it is also top-tier gardening that requires constant maintenance to keep Marge's hair looking right. 49. A subway handle is something nobody wants to touch, but a prankster put stickers on them to look like beer mugs. When commuters hold onto the straps, it looks like they are raising a toast to their fellow passengers. It makes the morning commute feel like a German Oktoberfest. 50. A billboard for a juicy burger looked delicious until a vandal climbed up and spray-painted "actual size" next to the massive image. It was a brutal critique of fast food portion sizes that legally counts as property damage but feels like consumer protection. 51. A park bench had a standard memorial plaque, but a prankster unscrewed it and replaced it with a custom brass plate. It reads, "In memory of the men who lost the will to live while waiting for their wives to shop." It is rude, stereotype-heavy, and statistically the most photographed bench in the city. 52. A bright blue recycling bin with a swinging lid looked boring until someone added two giant googly eyes on top and a cookie in its mouth. It instantly transformed into the Cookie Monster. Now people are actually excited to feed their trash to the Sesame Street character, keeping the streets cleaner. 53. A metal bollard on the sidewalk had been hit by a car and was bent backward at a crazy angle. Instead of fixing it, a vandal painted a black trench coat and sunglasses on it. It now looks exactly like Neo from The Matrix dodging bullets in slow motion. 54. Fresh, wet cement is usually a magnet for people writing their initials, but one geek had a better idea. They stuck a Han Solo action figure into the gray mix before it dried. Now it looks like the famous scene where he is frozen in carbonite, preserved forever on a city sidewalk. 55. A tree was slowly growing over a chain-link fence, swallowing the metal wire. A vandal saw the potential and glued two giant eyes above the contact point and added a speech bubble saying "Om Nom Nom." It turned a slow biological process into a scene of a hungry tree eating its lunch. 56. Public bathroom stalls are usually covered in gross scribbles, but one vandal decided to play a game with the tile grout. On the bottom tile, they wrote "Look up." Above that, "Look up again." This continued until the ceiling, where a final message read, "You are now peeing on your shoes." 57. A ventilation fan on the side of a building looked industrial and ugly, so a vandal spray-painted the Nintendo character Kirby with his mouth wide open around it. It looks like the pink blob is aggressively inhaling the entire building's air supply. 58. A serious statue of a World War I soldier holding binoculars got a modern update. A vandal used black tape to attach two empty beer bottles over the lenses. Now, instead of scouting for enemy troops, it looks like the general is just desperately trying to find the nearest open pub. 59. Someone found a gray electrical box on the street and painted it to look like a giant chrome kitchen toaster. They even fashioned two large bagels out of foam and stuck them in the top slots. It is a completely surreal appliance sitting on the sidewalk that makes everyone crave breakfast. 60. A massive billboard featured a model with her mouth wide open in surprise. A vandal climbed up and pasted a giant speech bubble coming from her mouth that simply said, "I forgot to turn the oven off." It turned a high-budget fashion advertisement into a relatable panic attack about household safety. 61. A city fountain with elegant stone fish spitting water is usually dignified, but a prankster filled the basin with dish soap. The resulting mountain of foam made it look like the fish were having a rabies outbreak. It was a maintenance nightmare, but for 1 hour, it was the cleanest monument in town. 62. A concrete staircase in the city center was dull gray until an artist painted the vertical face of every step. They turned the stairs into a giant set of piano keys. It doesn't actually make sound, but you can see every single pedestrian unconsciously trying to hop on the black keys. 63. A yellow "Watch for Ice" road sign is usually seasonal, but a vandal used black paint to stencil a portrait of the rapper Ice Cube right underneath. Now, instead of worrying about slippery roads, drivers are scanning the streets for a celebrity appearance. 64. A library book return slot is usually just a metal flap, but someone painted a ferocious monster face around it. The slot became the mouth with sharp teeth. Now, returning a late copy of Harry Potter feels like you are sacrificing your literature to a hungry beast from the dungeon. 65. A street sign warning of falling rocks showed the standard jagged rocks tumbling down. A creative vandal added a stick figure with a guitar and a mohawk underneath them. Suddenly, the sign wasn't about landslides. It was a warning that the Rolling Stones were about to rock this town. 66. A manhole cover on the street has a distinct turtle shell pattern, so a fan with some green paint finished the job. They painted the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles mask eyes peering out from the slots. It is a subtle nod to the heroes in a half-shell living right under our feet. 67. A security camera mounted on a low wall feels invasive, so a vandal built a tiny wooden birdhouse around it. The lens peeks out of the bird hole. It looks adorable, but it is ironically the most camouflaged spy device in the entire neighborhood, proving that cute things can still watch you. 68. A yellow caution. Wet floor sign is standard, but an artist drew a banana peel under the falling stick figure. It added a classic cartoon context to the slip. Now it looks like the little plastic man is the victim of a slapstick comedy routine rather than just a slippery floor. 69. A bronze statue of a famous philosopher sitting in deep thought looked too serious. A vandal placed a skateboard under his bronze feet and tilted his cap backward. Suddenly, the ancient thinker looked like he was contemplating the physics of a kickflip rather than the meaning of life. 70. A generic billboard for a personal injury lawyer asked the question, "Injured?" in huge letters. A vandal spray-painted a checkbox next to it and checked yes, but emotionally. It turned a predatory legal ad into a generation-defining statement about mental health that resonated with everyone who drove past. 71. A neighborhood sign warned drivers about slow children at play, which implies the kids are just not very athletic. A vandal with a competitive spirit taped a new sign underneath that read, "Fast children winning." It turned a safety warning into a ruthless commentary on neighborhood sports rankings. 72. A serious bronze statue of a general holding a sword looked ready for battle until a prankster taped a giant French baguette over the blade. Now, instead of leading an army into war, he looks like he is aggressively leading a charge to the nearest bakery for lunch. 73. A city bus had an ad for a dentist showing a perfect, gleaming smile. A vandal added a single perfectly drawn gold tooth to the model's mouth with a permanent marker. It wasn't just defacement, it was a dental upgrade that probably made the dentist furious. 74. A chain-link fence had a massive hole cut in the middle, which looked ugly and dangerous. A creative vandal repaired it using thick, bright red yarn, stitching the metal back together like a giant wound. It turned a piece of broken property into a Frankenstein-style art project. 75. A road sign simply said, "Speed hump," which is already a weird phrase if you think about it too much. A vandal added the words "free humps" underneath in professional lettering. It sounds like a scandalous offer, but technically they are just giving away the road bumps for free. 76. We have all pushed a door that was actually a pull, but one vandal made it intentional. They put a push sticker on a pull door and then added a smaller note below saying, "Push harder." It is pure evil watching confident people slam their bodies against a locked door repeatedly. 77. A standard "no parking" sign has an arrow pointing left and right. A vandal used a permanent red marker to add a heart at one end and a broken heart at the other. It implies that parking here is an emotional journey from love to heartbreak. 78. A dead-end sign at the bottom of a dark street is creepy enough, but a horror fan made it worse. They spray-painted a silhouette of a zombie horde in the distance and added the words, "Zombies ahead" under the sign. I guarantee nobody uses that street for a U-turn anymore. 79. A store window had a nasty spiderweb crack from an impact, but the owner couldn't afford to fix it yet. A vandal helped out by taping a Spider-Man action figure to the center of the shatter. Now it looks like Peter Parker just saved the shop from a robbery. 80. A massive billboard for a divorce lawyer asked the question, "Who can you trust?" in giant letters. A vandal climbed up and spray-painted the word Ghostbusters underneath. It is solid advice, honestly, because Bill Murray is probably cheaper than a divorce attorney and way more fun to hang out with. 81. A large rectangular electrical box on the sidewalk was painted gray and boring until an artist painted it to look like a giant VHS tape of the movie Shrek. It is a massive hit of nostalgia that makes every millennial want to find a VCR the size of a Toyota Prius. 82. A one-way street sign is a strict command, but a music lover decided to soften the blow. They added a second sign underneath that said, "or another," referencing the classic Blondie song. Now, you cannot look at the intersection without that catchy bass line playing in your head. 83. A majestic statue of a horse in the town square looked regal, but cold. A grandmotherly vandal knitted 4 bright pink leg warmers and placed them on the horse's legs during the night. The war horse went from intimidating to looking like it was ready for an 80s aerobics class. 84. A wooden telephone pole had a nasty vertical crack running down it. A vandal filled the crack with shimmering gold resin, borrowing the Japanese art of kintsugi. They turned a rotting piece of infrastructure into the most expensive-looking object on the street. 85. A sidewalk was covered in black gum spots that the city refused to clean. A vandal painted each spot to look like a different planet and connected them with constellation lines. They turned a gross hygiene problem into a walking tour of the solar system. 86. A blue water valve cover on the street looks industrial, but with a little white and red paint, a vandal turned it into Captain America's shield. It lies there on the asphalt, implying that one of the Avengers just dropped his gear and is probably looking for it nearby. 87. The glass case for a fire axe is serious business, but a vandal used glass paint to add a zombie silhouette reflection. It makes it look like the undead are right behind you, giving you a very legitimate reason to break the glass and grab the weapon. 88. A metal handrail on a staircase was bent and twisted from a car accident. Instead of fixing it, a street artist painted it with red and white stripes to look like a crazy straw. It turned a piece of dangerous twisted metal into a whimsical reminder of childhood juice boxes. 89. The pedestrian crossing signal usually flashes "Don't walk with a red hand." A vandal put a sticker over the text, so it just read, "Dance." Now, while waiting for the light to change, half the crowd is awkwardly shuffling their feet because the street sign told them to boogie. 90. A boring gray electrical box was minding its own business until a vandal attached 2 massive foam googly eyes and a red-painted tongue made of cardboard. It transformed the bland utility into a screaming monster that looks like it is about to devour the entire sidewalk. 91. A classical statue of a discus thrower looks incredibly intense, but a vandal changed the context completely by sliding a cardboard pizza box into his hand. Now, instead of competing in the ancient Olympics, he looks like a delivery guy frantically trying to get the pepperoni to your door in 30 minutes or less. 92. Those convex mirrors on street corners are meant for safety, but an artist turned one into a nightmare. They painted the edges to look like a giant bloodshot eyeball staring down at the intersection. It effectively makes every driver feel like they are being watched by a giant monster. 93. A generic gray utility box on the sidewalk was totally ignored until someone painted it to look like a stack of Marshall guitar amplifiers. It sits there silently on the street corner, but it looks loud enough to blow out the windows of the library across the street. 94. A "Do not enter" sign is usually a command, but a vandal decided to add a reasonable exception. They taped a smaller sign underneath that read, "Unless you have tacos." Suddenly, a strict traffic violation felt more like a negotiation based on delicious Mexican food. 95. A cracked pavement stone was loose and annoying, so a gamer painted the stone bright gold with a question mark. It looks exactly like a coin block from Super Mario. Pedestrians are now tempted to jump and hit it with their heads just to see if money comes out. 96. A generic "Keep Clear" warning painted on a garage door got a snarky update. A vandal spray-painted "I can see your blemishes" underneath. Now the door isn't asking for physical space, It is aggressively insulting your skincare routine. 97. A boring white wall had a small pipe leaking steam near the ground. Instead of fixing the leak, a vandal stenciled the words "Cloud Factory" above the vent. It turned a sign of industrial waste into a whimsical explanation for where the weather actually comes from. 98. A yield sign is a common traffic instruction, but a Star Wars fan decided to raise the stakes. They added a sticker underneath that said, "To the dark side." It implies that merging into traffic is actually a moral choice between good and evil, which honestly feels accurate during rush hour. 99. A public trash can is the last place you look for political commentary, but a vandal slapped a "Vote Here" sticker right above the opening. It is a simple, cynical, and devastatingly funny critique of the current election choices that probably got more engagement than the actual polling station. 100. A massive crack in a brick wall looked like structural damage until someone painted a tiny zipper at the top. It looks like the building is unzipping itself to reveal something new. It is a simple visual trick that turns a dangerous flaw into a clever piece of pop art. 101. A park sign listed prohibited items like "No alcohol" and "No drugs." A vandal added "No regrets" at the bottom in matching professional font. It turned a list of strict government rules into a motivational life motto about living dangerously. That is the full list. Now, be real with me in the comments. Do you think this kind of stuff is actually harmless fun? Or are these people just annoying jerks destroying public property? I honestly want to know where you draw the line between a great joke and a crime. If you laughed at least once, hit that like button and subscribe for more insanity.